Can be specific about my area of research, management accounting, and focusing on the balance scorecard and management control system. So I did actually my qualitative research back during my PhD studies in 2013. 2013, I graduated from Lathrop University in Melbourne. So I did case study on government agency in Australia. So I did a lot of about 22 interviews with the government, with the official from the government agency, and then from there I just recently got published my article published in accounting auditing and accountability journal. So it's a Q1 journal on focusing on the management accounting and balance scorecard practice in that organization. So before we start, okay, for the purpose of our presentation today, if you have any question, feel free to ask me anytime, or if you have you want to type in something in the chat box, so that will be fine. Okay, so our presentation today, I will be covering data analysis and reporting, but before that, I may recap several points on what is the qualitative research, what are the differences between qualitative and quantitative, and then what are the aspects that we need to focus on from the qualitative research. So I think this workshop is very useful, because during my time I have to read several books in order to understand what is qualitative research. And then I feel that when I read one book, for example, there are about 200 pages something, so I feel that everything is important, what we need to focus on, because I feel everything is important. Everything that I need to remember, I highlight everything and so on. But when we attend this kind of presentation or this kind of workshop, so the speakers normally will help you to guide you to focus on what are the aspect that we need to study more, and then that where we when we read that particular book again, we can know where we want to go, and then so that we can do more further research on that particular area. So because during my time I don't have this kind of workshop, so I study and read several books, read journal articles, and then I learn from my experience, because for qualitative research, we don't really have the specific guideline on what to do. Okay, there is no step-by-step process on what to do. So normally during my time, I just dive in, go to the field, and then learn from them. So it's quite risky actually, my way of doing. But nowadays there are a lot of research, because during my time the qualitative research is not really prominent. Maybe when we do the presentation, when I presented my study in Australia and New Zealand last time, so people are quite skeptical, because for example, from quantitative research people, they question that how you come up with such interpretation, how you come up with that conclusion, because you don't have the significance level or p-value and regression R-square, something like that. So everything is coming from your own interpretation, whereas you are just a student. So that's okay. I will guide you. That's the concern. I will guide you on how to create the report, the findings report that shows that we have been in the field. That is the most important part. We have been in the field. We have been doing the data collection part rigorously. We have followed the right procedure when there is necessary, and so on. But nowadays, qualitative research is getting famous, and people there are quite many people are promoting the qualitative research workshop on qualitative research and so on. So and also the country, the US based university, they heavily rely on quantitative. Now they start looking at qualitative research. So because we qualitative research, we assume, or researchers assume, that qualitative research is considered as what we call as alternative method. Okay, the conventional or positivist method uh, is under the quantitative, but for qualitative we call as alternative method, an alternative stream of research. Okay, so I believe previous speakers have already talked about the definition of qualitative research, but if I may repeat again the definition. So I took two definitions from two scholars. Okay, so I highlighted several points here. For example, number one, qualitative research is a method of naturalist inquiry. It aims to study people in their natural social setting. Okay, so firstly, we focus on the people at their natural setting, meaning that when we go there, when we do the research, we don't try to bother them, we don't try to disturb them. We try to see or observe what they are doing, and then we record that as our data. For example, we observe people at the office, and then we try not to communicate or mingle. We just sit maybe at the side of the office, and then we record the activities or the behavior of the people. And then the focus is on the meanings of the participants. Okay, when we interview them, we're not looking at the words by words used by the interviewee or the people that we interview. Rather, we look at the meanings given by the participants as a whole. Maybe if they talk about what they like, so we try to understand their points as a whole. Okay, the definition number two, qualitative research believe that if we are to understand a topic, we need to look at it through the eyes of those who experience it and try to understand it from their point of view. So we go there, we ask the people what they are feeling about those particular area. I remember that when during my one seminar that I attended last time, there is one speaker who tried to compare the qualitative and quantitative, and he told us that for quantitative research, it's kind like you put something into the box. You put things or stuff into a box, and then what stuff you put in the box is based on your preference. Okay, for example, so let's say the survey, you try to pick the certain variables, and then you try to strip the answers by the participants into like a scale, for example. And then there are several questions that you ask, and then there are several construct of variables that you have selected. So you try to put something into the box based on your preference or based on your research, literature, and so on. So whereas for the qualitative research, we try to we try to pick up something from the box that we don't know what is the content of the box. So we try to pick up something, and then there is one thing, and then we pick up something again, and then there is another thing that's quite surprising. So I don't say that qualitative is better than quantitative. Of course, no. There is always advantages and disadvantages of any research. So what we qualitative research try to focus on is that we don't want to strict the answers by the participants into specific context, but we want to understand what is actually happening. But the danger is we don't know what is the boundary. We need to set a boundary so that the things that has been spoken by the participant is within our research context. That is one of the challenge in the qualitative research. Okay, so how does qualitative research differ from quantitative? So normally we ask qualitative, we ask what, and then there is one. I should put the another question that is more important here. How and why? How and why is the most the most questions that we ask, the most important question that we ask under qualitative research. How and why? So normally, how is about from my understanding, how is about what practices, what are the management practices is under the is try to focus on the practical context. We try to understand. For example, my study is about the balance scorecard. So I try to understand what is the process of the balance scorecard, what are the what are the stages of the implementation, what are the uses of the balance scorecard, and so on. So it's from the practical point of view. And then why is we try to answer them from theoretical perspective. For example, if we say that the balance scorecard is adopted because of the management feel that the balance scorecard is good, so we try to understand that from theoretical perspective. What are the reasons the balance scorecard adopted? So there is maybe some theories that we selected here. So we try to compare the point that we get from the practical findings and try to compare that using the theoretical construct. So why is represented by the theoretical explanation. So the type of question is broad. Of course, we want to get people to talk about their perspective, from their perspective as much as possible, because we want to get rich data. The aim is to get rich data or thick description. We don't want to get yes or no answer. We want them to explain in details the aspect that you want to know. Okay, so that's why the data collection is intensive. Sample size, yeah, is small because the aim is to get the people to talk elaboratively about certain topic. And then the generalizability, this is the one of the challenge. This is what we always discuss on about the generalization of our study. So the focus for qualitative research is to generalize the theory. Whereas for the quantitative, I believe, is to generalize the sample, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so for example, if I choose one theory, for example, I choose one theory. So in my case, I use innovation diffusion theory. So I try to explain that this theory is also applicable in my case. This theory, the innovation diffusion theory, is also applicable in my case. Not only applicable in the literature that I have read on, but also applicable in my case. So that's why that's how we argue. If people ask us about how you generalize your research, we don't generalize the sample, but we try to generalize the theory to prove that the theory is also applicable in our setting. Okay, do you have any questions so far, or if I'm too fast, or you don't understand or not?
Hello. Yeah.
Can we proceed? I'm always afraid that I'm talking alone because sometimes I may accidentally mute my
Assalamualaikum, Dr.
mic.
Can you explain
so yes, it's
with method for accounting research, qualitative or quantitative for the basic?
Okay. If you sorry, if you are searching for the appropriate research method, I think from my experience, it depends on your supervisor first. Firstly, it depends on your supervisor, what your supervisor's convenient, what the research method that your supervisor convenient at. And then again, the most important part is your research question. Okay, if you have your research objective, and then you try to ask what method that is suitable for your research. If you want to know about the detailed story about something, so you try to go for qualitative. But if you want to try to prove something, maybe the relationships or maybe the association and so on, the differences and so on, that is clear cut, more obvious, more direct, so you go for quantitative. Because under qualitative is quite hard to prove any relationship. Maybe if you want to say that balanced scorecard improve performance, so qualitative don't tend to prove the relationship, because we need to show the relationship is there. Whereas under quantitative, if you fulfill the requirement, for example, you pass the R-square threshold, and that is safe to say that the relationship is exists. But under qualitative, because it's based on subjective explanation,
so thank you very much,
it is quite challenging. Okay, you're welcome. So how about mixed method? How about you want to mix quantitative and qualitative? So there is actually school of thought. Some researchers don't really prefer to mix the two methods, because they are different paradigm, right? Different. If you learn about the paradigm, there are several paradigms under research method. So for qualitative, the perspective is we view the world as subjective. But if the people is from quantitative area, they view the world as objective, because we view under quantitative, we assume that everything must be in the form of number or in the form of figure, whereas under quantitative is more like the subjective point of view. So some researcher, they don't agree to put together two research method under one study. If you want to study the same phenomena or object or aspect or topic, so some researcher don't really like to put together two methods. But if you want to use two methods, for example, survey and interviews, so it can be categorized under two approaches: theory testing and theory development. So it must be purposes, specific reason for why you choose two methods. For example, under theory testing, you use qualitative field research for hypothesis development and pilot testing prior to survey. So under this method, the aim is to use the survey method, but before you conduct the survey, you try to interview several people to get the idea what is actually happening, and then try to develop the hypothesis and so on. And under theory development, the aim is to the main data, the main method is qualitative method, but the survey is to prove some relationship. So that is under theory development. So under this approach, you conduct the qualitative research first, and then from there you get they try to develop the survey instrument, and then finally you prove that there is some relationship exists from your participants. Okay, I tried to use both I tried to use survey. In my study, I have two methods as well. One is I heavily rely on qualitative, but I also include some online survey. But during when I submit to the examiners, one of the examiners, he suggests that the survey is not really fit into the qualitative findings. So that's okay. There is no major correction and so on. He just advised that. But for my publication after that, so I remove every information on survey. So I just focus on the qualitative data. And then some use a balance theory testing and theory development. But this kind of method or this kind of approach involve multiple iterations of research design. So you go to the survey and then you come back to the interview and so on and so forth. So I think it depends because if you it depends on who your examiners are. If you know your examiners beforehand and then you try to look at their research project and also research article, so you try to check whether the examiners, your potential examiners, use these approaches before you can before you can proceed with your studies. So, 5 main types of qualitative research. This is, I believe that previous speakers have already talked about these types of qualitative research. So we have narrative, we have phenomenology, ethnography, case study, and grounded theory. So normally in our area, marketing, management, and accounting, under qualitative research, we normally focus or we normally use case study and phenomenology. Case study and phenomenology here and here. So I try to differentiate between the phenomenology and case study. Grounded theory is the most difficult approaches because we try to develop theory, and then it's heavily critical approach and needs a lot of interpretation. So the most easiest method is phenomenology, and then followed by case study. So phenomenology, we try to choose several participants, several interviewees that kind of have the same criteria. Maybe for example, the position as managers, we try to interview managers from different companies to understand the topic. For example, if you want to know the advantages of online learning, for example, online learning, so you ask several lecturers who have the same experience on online learning. So this is what we call phenomenology. Okay, so the unit of analysis is the studying several individuals that have shared the experience. Whereas for case study, we study in an event, a program, activity more than one individual. So, for example, you go to one company or one organization, and then we pick one topic, and you try to understand this topic as a whole rather than the people or the opinion of people, but we try to understand the topic in detail. For example, the balance scorecard that I studied before. So I tried to interview the managers, the top managers, the lower level of managers, the middle line of managers, and also general employees. So I try to talk to different level of people, try to understand what are their opinion about the balance scorecard, and I also try to talk to the users of the balance scorecard, the people who use the balance scorecard, the people who develop the balance scorecard, or the people who manage the system, and then also the people who do not know about the balance scorecard. So I talk to different kind of people to get more detailed understanding what is actually happening. So case study is involved in-depth description and analysis. Okay. So under phenomenology, we normally normally focus on interviews, whereas case study, it must include more than interviews. It must include interviews, documents, observations of people behavior, and also if you have chances to attend their activity. So is very is very preferable. Okay, in my case, I only get to conduct interviews and also only have to rely on documents because I asked the organization to do some observation. I wish to attend their management meetings, and also I want to be there in the companies and to observe the behavior of the company is the organization is quite uh, strict in terms of the outsiders. So they just give the people to be interviewed, and then they just provided documents that I requested. But luckily, I finished my study, and then they continue giving me support throughout the study. So basically, case study they need to include more than interviews, which is you rely on documents, review, and observation. But whereas for phenomenology, you normally rely on interview. Interviews alone is sufficient. So okay, so under qualitative research, we have several types of data. So if you conduct a survey, the data could be the responses, and then you describe the data. Then you describe the data using the descriptive statistic and so on. But under qualitative, I will show you here the 4 types of data. This is the one. Number one is interview transcriptions. This is the people that I have interviewed before. You can see that his explanation is quite detailed. I asked him one question only. Can you please explain the function of your section, performance, and customer experience? This is the first question that I asked him to get a sense what is his job, what are the general activities that he's doing, and so on. So this is what we want to achieve. So to get the explanation as much as possible. So after we conduct interview, we need to transcribe the interviews verbatim. Verbatim meaning that we need to transcribe words by words. If, for example, the interviewee is thinking and said, is the interviewee is maybe the tone is different, so we need to record that. I have one question in the text box here. I lost your point about 5 categories of qualitative research. Okay, I will just summarize a little bit on types of qualitative research. So because I presume that these types of qualitative research has been explained before, right, in your previous session. So I only just focusing on phenomenology and case study because these methods are the most used methods in our area. Phenomenology normally the main difference is when we talk about phenomenology and case study is that case study rely on more than interviews. We need to include in observation and document review as well. But under phenomenology, we just can focus on interviews. Okay, so the focus of the phenomenology is to understand the experience, but the focus of the case study is to understand case. The case could be event or program or activity, or in my case is a system. Okay, in my case, it's the system. So I tried to use before the balance, try to understand the balance scorecard. But if you choose to study balance scorecard from the perspective of the from the phenomenological method, it's also acceptable. Maybe you can choose several managers with the same kind of position, same job, similar job position, and ask them to share their experience. But in my case, if I use case study, I interviewed multiple level of managers. Multiple level of managers. We want to try to understand the balanced scorecard as a whole, not only the usage of the balanced scorecard, but also the adoption, the effectiveness, the weaknesses, the strength, and so on. Okay. Any questions? Okay, can we move on to the next slides? So the first slides I have explained before is on the interview transcriptions. This is the data. This is the what we need to focus on during our analysis. And then we have field notes. Before that we call the setting, the research site as field. So I hope you don't confuse about why I always call as field. Field notes is like a diary. It's like a diary where we try to describe the activity and our reflection. If we have further questions in my mind, and then it's kind of what we have in what we're planning to do in the subsequent data collection stage and so on. So, for example, here, this information is taken from the internet. So, apart from the interview transcription, so this researcher maintain a field note. So, for example, in the bracket, do other nurses feel or think or do the same? So, this is the questions that the researcher asks in her mind. Okay, in her mind, he asked this question, and he need to put this in something, in a note. So why? I will explain to you later why this note is important. How exactly? For example, how exactly? And then a lot of question mark here. And then there is another statement. She really did not seem convinced. She cited rumors in the community as a potential barrier. So this is the questions that the researcher asked in his mind about the participants. Okay, but we just in our conversation with the participants, we just ask the normal question. But of course, there is something come out in our mind, so we need to record that somewhere else. Okay. And then the types of data number 3 is document. So if you go for data collection, while you're doing the interview, you try to ask for documents. For example, you can ask, the participants, can you borrow us some documents that I can look at if it's allowable by your organization, for example, or if the organization feel that that particular document is confidential, so you just take a look and then provide the summary form. Okay, why? And then you need to record why that particular document is significant to your research, and then you summarize the content of the document, and then try to link your document to the research question. So sometimes some students they try to include this document form in the appendix. But for my case, I just list down what documents that I have gotten from the company, and as well as the document that I got it myself from the internet and from the library. So you need to list down not the name of document, but the types of document. For example, I have in my study I have looked at the parliamentary handset, meaning that the parliamentary meeting, the conversation or the debate during the meeting. So I include that as part of my documents review process. Okay, the type number 4 is observation. So you observe what is happening and you take a note. So for example, you You try to observe the behavior of the students in the way of the behaviors of the teachers, sorry, the behaviors of the student in the classroom or the behavior of the teachers. So you try to record as much as possible, maybe do some drawing here and there, and then try to highlight some point that you need to look at further. Okay, so this is all the 4 data, normal data that we have under qualitative research. Okay, how about reliability and validity? So there are also concern about reliability and validity, but it's not as strict as quantitative, because under quantitative we need to do, for example, combat alpha, and we need to do we need to explain on how we treat on the missing data, outliers, and so on. So under qualitative, so to ensure that the reliability under qualitative is concerned with preserving the data integrity and logic of conclusion, meaning that how the readers would know that our conclusion is logical, or how the readers would know that our conclusion is valid or reliable or is true. So there is one way is by maintaining audit trails, where we keep everything, the procedures, evidence, and the process of our idea emerge and so on under maybe in one place. So we record the process of our research analysis, okay, from the data collection stage until writing up. So this is what we call as audit trail. And then under validity, so concern is more concerned about the whether the researchers are investigating the phenomena that are purported to be studied. For example, we have our topic that we have set or determined before, and then is there towards the end of our research, or when we make the conclusion, whether we have studied the same thing as we intended to. Okay, so how to make sure that the validity issue is preserved? So we do the data triangulation and cross-reference. So that's why if under case study, we rely on interview, document, and so on. So also interview, we try to get participants, interviewees that can support the opinion from the previous interviewees. For example, if you ask the one interview, for example, I asked during my time, I asked what is the strength of the balance scorecard from your opinion. So the interview said that they feel that the balance scorecard is good to show the progress of your work. So you try to ask another interviewee whether he agreed about this point. So this is also called as data triangulation and cross-reference. Not only it involves several kind of data, but also under the same data, but we can prove certain point using several participants. And also audit trail is also important here. And then the construct decision rules derived from theoretical framework, meaning that we have our theory beforehand, and then the theoretical construct. Under qualitative, we don't normally call the construct as variables, but we call maybe different construct or elements or components, theoretical components, and so on, because we don't call them as variables. So our decisions, our conclusion must be coming from the theoretical framework and also literature, from the literature. Okay, and then result of applying the theories are compared to previous studies. So for example, if you choose one theory and then you try to compare how you interpret the use of that particular theory with the previous study that have the same theory. So you try to read the previous literature, and then you can include that in the discussion. Normally we can address this point in the discussion section. And then finally, key informant review, meaning that after we finish our findings, we supply we try to submit our findings first to the maybe to the interview that we have transcribed can submit to the participants to check whether there is some confidential information that they we can also submit our findings. Maybe there is one particular people from that organization that we can submit the findings so that they can check whether the findings is true or valid or not to their setting. Okay. So I need to constantly check my check board. If there is any question. So any questions so far? Okay, now so we can proceed to the data analysis. So I will be explaining on three general aspect topics or the procedures generating codes and managing the codes. So, under data analysis procedure, it involves interpreting text against the research question and theoretical framework. So, it's important that we have the research question and theoretical framework before we try to interpret. So, interpret here is when we try to understand the meaning. Understand the meaning given by the participants, and then whether the meanings here is applicable to our theory and research question. So we always reflect when we do starting from the data collection up until writing up, we'll always reflect on the research question and theoretical framework. So one of the challenges of qualitative analysis lie in making sense of large amount of data. That's very true, especially with case study. I have like 10,000 pages of data. So if we feel like, because we are a novice researcher, we feel like everything is important. So we are afraid that if we delete some point, this point might be useful in future. So that is one big challenge for any quality. The data is very large, so we need to examine carefully which data is need to be deleted and which data need to be maintained for our further analysis. Okay, so normally the process of data analysis starts from reducing the raw data, and then we try to identify significances, pattern, and essence of what the data conveys. For example, if you read something, you get a sense, you get the intuition that study. So during my time when I split my data collection into two stages. One is what I call as field study, because when I get access, the permission to conduct my research in this organization. So I don't know what is actually happening. This organization is quite big, it's very big. It has 27,000 employees. So I don't. So what I have in my mind, the management accounting practices with no specific one, because I don't really understand what is happening. So first I went field study, and then I tried to talk to three people from management accounting, from the auditing and so on. And then in my mind I bring two techniques: total quality management (UKM), and the other one is performance management system. So I try to ask them about UKM, performance management system, so on. So turn out they don't really talk about the balance scorecard. So it's quite surprising for me because I don't prepare about the balance scorecard. But they talk about the balance scorecard. They say that they have the balance scorecard and they use the balance scorecard for measuring and managing performance. So from there, from the field study, when I go back to my university, I try to do the research more on the balance scorecard. So I shift my focus from the UKM to the balance scorecard. So I tried to search from the internet about this organization and the balance scorecard, and then try to find what is the more appropriate theories that can be used, because we need to prepare the theory before we go to the field. So, so that's why That's why I'm trying to tell about the significance, because from our conversation with the interviewees, we can identify what are the significance point, or what are the patterns, what are the trend of the topic of the conversation. From there, it can lead us to our research finding. So this information is taken from pattern. This is quite famous researchers who produce several books on qualitative research. He said that there is no formula, rule, or straightforward test in determining the significance, in devising the analytical thought process, and in establishing reliability and validity. Yes, there is true, because we don't have the p value, significant levels, and so on. We don't have step-by-step process in conducting our analysis. Instead, the best approach is to do your very best with your full intellect to fairly represent the data and communicate what the data reveal given the purpose of the study. Actually, when I found this statement during my study, I'm quite happy, because I feel like I have found the light that shine in my study. Because during my study, I was quite worried how I will go about doing the data analysis, because there is no straightforward. I tried to read several books, and then most of the book talking about the same thing: coding, managing, reducing raw data, and so on. And then when I found this statement, so I'm quite happy, because what he is trying to do is do your very best with your full intellect. So regardless of you are the novice researcher, the PhD student, or the experienced researcher, and so on. So we have to do our very best in representing the data, but everything must be based on the purpose of the study, meaning that we have the research question and then the theoretical framework here. So we try to represent the research question and theoretical framework based on our data, and then, but as long as we are careful enough to consider or to incorporate all the validity concern and reliability concern here. Okay, as long as we can report to the in the thesis that we have maintained this point, so I think it's quite safe, because in my thesis I only have the section on data analysis. I only have about 1.5 page for data analysis to explain what I have done with my data. Only 1.5 page. Okay, so it's not the data analysis. When we try to explain how we conduct the analysis, it's not really lengthy. In any journal, in any research article, also in any thesis, I normally found the data analysis section is very brief. Okay, because we because this is normally the approaches that we explain. Okay, how we conduct the validity and reliability issues. So, sorry. So, data analysis procedure in a snapshot. Firstly, we try to find a focus, meaning that we try to find a topic here. We have the topic, we have the research question, we have the theory that we prepare before we go to the field. So it's very important before you conduct the interview, you have the topic in mind and then you have theory. Before I conducted my interview last time, I have 3 theories that I bring into my study, because understanding that this organization is the government agency. So normally in my area, when the setting is government agency, there is one popular theory we call as institutional theory. So I bring this theory because considering that this organization is a government agency. And then I also bring innovation diffusion theory. Innovation diffusion theory because the balance scorecard is the one of the innovation in the management accounting area. Another theory, can't remember another theory. Maybe agency theory, because I read a lot of articles about this organization. There is one article specifically for talk about agency theory. So I try to bring these 3 theory, but end up in my findings, I only able to explain innovation diffusion theory, and also I had another actor network theory. So this is normal in any qualitative research. But even though we ignore this is also the findings. So I reported in my thesis that institutional theory and agency theory is surprisingly not applicable in my case. Why? So I include my okay. Most important part is finding a focus. Okay, and then we try to manage the data. This software here is to help. So I got message in the chat box, internet problem, line problem. So you couldn't couldn't hear my my presentation clearly, is it? Is there any problem with my presentation or internet connection? Okay, I think if maybe Fitri and Fitri can later on, maybe he can share the recorded presentation today with you guys, or maybe can look at back again at what you have missed on.
Assalamualaikum, Doctor.
Waalaikumsalam.
No problem. You can continue.
No problem. Okay, no problem. Thank you. Thank you, Jasim.
Okay, Doctor.
Okay, so I can proceed now. Okay, managing data. So this is another step in data analysis. So basically, this is the data analysis stages. Okay, no statistical tests and no rigid formula what to follow on. So we manage the data. We have a lot of data. For example, you have 10,000 data. So you manage for example, in one place, you put you rename the title of the files and so on. And then you read and annotate. You read and then you read and then you put notes into the, for example, you put notes into your documents. The notes is to reflect what you are thinking about. So I have one question in the chat box. Doctor said, two theories are not applicable to your study. May I know why? Because the video, okay. So if I can go back to my previous slide, I mentioned before that I bring along 3 theories before I conducted my case study, and end up during my data analysis and writing up, I dropped 2 theories, choose only one theory that is applicable, and especially with the case study research, actually normal in qualitative research. This is not applicable because when I ask question, for example, under institution theory, the assumption under institution theory is that if some organization adopt innovation, is adopting innovation, this organization adopt this innovation because of the pressure by the outsiders, maybe pressure by the government, or maybe pressures by the society, and so on. But when I ask this kind of question, for example, I ask them, what are the reasons your company adopted balanced scorecard? So they told me that normally because of the balanced scorecard is good to be used for their organization. For example, is they can look at the performance in one place and so on. So I try to ask several people about the same assumption, under the same assumption of institution theory, and then found that the assumption is not applicable. So we need only we need to justify that not only one people who've said so, but also there are several other people who agree that institution theory is not applicable in our case. So we need to report that, because normally in the literature, agency theory is applicable in the agency, government agency, but not in my case. So this is another interesting finding that we need to report on. Okay. Okay, and then so we continue with the the fourth stage, categorizing the data. So we categorize the data into several themes. I will explain about themes, of course, after this. And then we try to link the data. For example, we try to link one point to another, and then maybe we create another categories and link the categories, and then corroborate evidence. For example, evidence from interview 1. Evidence from interview 1 is cross-reference with evidence from interview 2, or we can we can confirm whether the point explained by interview 1 is also presence in the document. For example, because the limitation of the qualitative research is we rely on memory of the interviewees, right? We rely on memories of the interviewees. Some event occurred maybe in 5 years ago, so some of the interview maybe cannot recall the event properly. So we need to, if he said something, so we need to check whether the point that have been explained by interviewee is also appear in the document. So that's why we need to corroborate the evidence. And also because some of the interviewees might be biased, he's quite skeptical about innovation, for example. So we need to check whether this opinion is also agreed by another interviewee. And finally, we try to produce an account or a story about our case. So basically, the main process is here, reading and annotating. The main process is here. So I try to explain details, the reading and annotating. So this is the stages that I have taken in my study. Firstly, when you get the data, we finish transcribing the interviews, and then we arrange our data accordingly. And then firstly, we read the data to determine the applicable existing code. Code here, I think I have codes. Codes here is normally the theoretical elements. Okay, the theoretical element. For example, under if I take one theory, innovation diffusion theory. Okay, there is 5 elements here. Complexity, trialability, and there is another 3. So this is our theoretical element, 5 theoretical element. So we convert or we rename when we do the analysis. We call as codes, or some books call it as nodes, or also themes. Okay. So this is the coding. Coding process is where we create the codes based on the theory, and then also when we read them, we try to understand what the meaning of this explanation. For example, when we read this paragraph, okay, so we found that this statement is can be understood as compatibility point. So we cut and paste. So we choose this and then we put this under compatibility. So we can do that to 2 approaches. One is manual and one is using computerized software. So I will explain about how how you're going to analyze or you're going to do the coding based on manual as well as based on computerized software, using computerized software. So that is the coding process. Okay, we try to read the interview transcription and then put certain point under the relevant coding. This is the first interpretation that we done. So we interpret the meaning of the whole sentences, the whole paragraph, and to determine which coding is appropriate, which theoretical construct is appropriate. Okay, and then let's say we have 5 beforehand. Before we have 5 codes, and then suddenly we feel that some point is important, and then this particular point doesn't fall under the 5 codings that we created earlier. So we can create under the new codes when we feel appropriate. And then impression or intuitions and explanation regarding certain move were recorded using the memo and annotation function and will link to specific part of the data. For example, when you create new codes here, we try to record the reason why you create the code, why the new code is important. And for example, if you feel that there is maybe you feel about something about the data, for example, you feel that, okay, this is important for my let's say theory innovation theory part. So this is your intuition, right? When you read something, of course you can feel, you have some feeling. For example, okay, this is very important, or this is not important, or this point linked to another point. So you need to record everything, your intuition. Why you need to record that? Because the intuition is actually the result of your analysis. Remember that qualitative research, we don't have any software. The software that we'll explain later on is only to help us manage the data, but the analysis is done in our mind. The analysis is done in our mind based on the readings. That's why we need to read and read and read, because we need to understand what is happening. We need to do the analysis. We need to identify the pattern, the significance that I have explained before. So when you have the intuition, you have a gut feeling on something. Okay, you need to record down because this is the result of what you have analyzed in your mind. You might not be aware that this is the analysis result, but later on when you want to do the writing up, so this annotation and memo is very important to structure your writing. So another thing is what I have done in my study is I always talk or discuss the interview, the conversation that I am having with my interviewee. I always discuss that with my friends. There during my study, I have several friends who is also doing qualitative research and also doing the case studies research. So we always share or exchange the points. So from there, when actually we try to tell the story to the others, actually it's part of the analysis that we are not aware of, that where we try to convey the important point here. So when we try to convey from the 10,000 pages of data, and then we try to convey the data in, for example, in one paragraph. So this is the result of analysis, the result of what you have understand from all the data that you have. So yeah, we talk about the data as a whole to your friends or to your supervisors, and then they give you the feedback. So you need to record them because this help you a lot. In my study, my conversation with my friends always help me a lot in giving me direction on what to focus on, what are the importance, what are the significance of the data to my study. So and then when you finish, for example, you have 21 interview transcription, for example, and you finish coding everything, and then when you and then you go back to the every node. For example, under compatibility node, for example, we choose one node here, compatibility node, and then you read all the information. I will show about this process to you later. You read the information under this compatibility notes, the interview quotation that you have put here, any documents that you have put here, and then you read it again, and then this time you have maybe you have different opinion or different view because you have read all the data, and then it can give you different direction to the first round of coding, second round, and then because the interaction is more insightful as the researcher had gained more knowledge in general sense of data. For example, you read again the compatibility notes, the information under compatibility, and then you feel that some point is not related to the compatibility, but is related to, for example, complexity node. So you delete the information here and you move to the complexity. So there are a lot of changes happening again here because you understand more about your data. You finish reading the first round and then you now reading the second round. So different direction, maybe this time around. And then the codes here, the coding compatibility or complexity now incorporate more data from multiple sources, and then enable cross-reference for validity and reliability points because you have all the information or all the interview quotation that fall under compatibility. So and then you have multiple sources, for example, from observation, from the interview, from the document. So you put under one section or one notes. So this way it can address the validity and reliability. So again, data reflection are made in relation to the similarities, differences, and interdependence between points. For example, if there is any similarities between two interview quotations from two different people, so you will need to make a note using a memo or annotation function. Again, the data to be recorded, highlighted, rearranged, and deleted. Again, this process happen. You need to do it again until you finally satisfied with your coding process. Okay, how you do the coding manually if you don't have computerized software? So normally, for example, this is the interview transcription, one interview. So you need to photocopy into several copies, and then maybe you highlight the important point, and then you put the reflection using sticky note, what you feel about this information, what you feel about the interviewees, and so on. And then you cut the certain quotation or certain paragraph that referring to the certain construct, and then you cut and paste. For example, this is coming from the interview 1, interviewee. You cut and you paste into this is interview 2, into one place, one paper, and you cut and paste the relevant point or the relevant paragraph that belong to the compatibility construct. And then you need to arrange it into several folders, and then maybe you have all the sticky notes in your wall, and then try to create the relationship and so on. So this is the manual data analysis process. So it depends on you. From my case, it depends everything on computer. Towards the end of my study, I don't really print. I don't have articles that I have print out anymore because everything is my computer. So I'm quite heavily rely on computer. So that's why I choose computerized software for to manage my data. So I have found the source from the internet. Who this internet source try to compile all the software for qualitative data analysis. So the most popular one is NVivo and Atlas DI. NVivo is quite pricey, it's quite expensive. Atlas DI is cheaper, but I think the NVivo is quite user friendly. It's like using Microsoft Word. It's intuitive. Okay, it's quite intuitive and NVivo, but it's quite pricey. Okay, so it depends on that. Some of the software here, I think is free. You can Provalis is quite Provalis Research, for example. I'm not sure if whether it's free or not, but you need to look at further on that software. But this is we unlike quantitative, the use of software is not compulsory. So it depends on us. I have a friend who relied on traditional method, manual data analysis. We did our study about the same time, and then he relied on manual analysis. She told me about how she cut and paste everything, manage the filing system. So she's very neat person, and I'm not. So I prefer to rely on qualitative data software. And turns out she's now a professor. So it doesn't matter what method you are using on, as long as you do it properly. Okay, so using a software for data analysis. So it's advisable to use computerized qualitative data analysis software to aid the analysis. Again, the keywords here is to aid. It's not to perform the analysis, it's just to assist us to do the analysis, because the software capability, however, is only in data management. It does not think, unlike the SPSS, PLS, you input the data in the software and then you follow the procedure before you can click on the, for example, regression and so on. And then when you click on regression, for example, you want to do the regression, and then the software will do the thinking behind the scene, and then there is output appear in your screen. So you can use that output as your analysis. But under qualitative research, it don't do that for us. It doesn't do the analysis, but we ourselves have to do it. Okay, the data here, the software here is just to assist us. Okay, but why? Why we can use we can rely on software to interface data in multiple file format, enabling that data to be retained and modified within a single place. For example, I have 10,000 pages of data. So how can I cut and paste, photocopy everything and put into the filing system? So it's easier. And for example, you have the Excel file, you have the PDF file, or you have picture files, or you can put that into a single place. So the data source could be retrieved to understand its wider context. For example, here, if you this is one interview quotation from the interview one, and then you want to understand the whole context, the wider context. You want to understand the what is the point of conversation understand the interview one about. So you can double click on this statement, and then it will go back to the whole interview transcription by interviewee one. So that's what I like about the using the software. The software capability, however, is only in data management. It does not think. It is to deal with the messiness of qualitative data and to facilitate the reiterative interpretation process and data for user, because we always can go back to the data and highlight, and we can always create a new project, copy the project, and so on. So any questions so far? We have like about half an hour remaining. Explain content analysis. Mama Imran Farouk asked to explain the content analysis. I think the content analysis, it's different from the interpretation and under the our focus our focus for qualitative is to interpret. For example, we have one paragraph of interview. Okay, open one interview file. Okay, so content analysis may feel that if you want to see under content analysis, maybe you want to see how many words they have talked about balance scorecard. So maybe you can try to count how many balance scorecard appear, and then whether there is if one mention of balance score, the point 1, 2, or 3, and so on. But for qualitative, we are more on try to interpret. Okay, so for example, we take this statements here from here to here. So what are the meaning? What are the meaning of this statement as a whole? Whole point here refer to the compatibility issue. Even though the wording of compatibility is not here, but from the whole sentences here, it shows that the interviewee trying to explain on the compatibility. So this is what we call as interpret the data against theory. We have the theory. So this is compatibility is coming from my theory that I have explained to you before. The first time, as I explained before, the first time you might feel that this point is a construct, but maybe after you read second time, third time, it belong to another construct, for example, on complexity. So interpretation can be changed later on, depending on the stage of our study. Or maybe if experienced researcher, they interpret different things. So that is not a problem for us as long as we follow our research question and theoretical construct. Okay, so coding, the process of coding. Earlier I mentioned that the coding can be developed from theoretical elements, can also reduce and contextual information. For example, maybe practical description about the balance scorecard here. I try to understand the use, so I create the code on use. So I also create the code on effectiveness. This is about the practical description of codes on maybe the resistance. If there is any employee who resists or who doesn't like the balance scorecard and so on. And then so this is coming from the literature. And then contextual information, maybe we about the organization, so maybe about the history, maybe about the funding process, anything that you found during your so how to do the coding. I have done earlier create two codes here. This is NVivo software. So you just open the software and then if you want to add one code, so you click the coding here. So you create new code, right click. For example, this is based on my theory of innovation diffusion, complexity. So you add the complexity. Okay, we have that name earlier. So trialability. Okay, let's say I have 3. And then the interview data. So click the files. So you can just add and drag and drop. You can just drag and drop the data. So I have choose 5 interview transcription. Just drag into the box in the NVivo software. And then we try to wait for the software to. Okay, Chris cannot be. Okay, so I have managed to transfer 4 interview transcription from my work file, Microsoft Word file, into the NVivo. So without any problem, only 4 can be transferred. Maybe there is some error maybe I opened this file actually. I didn't close the file earlier, so that's okay. We can only focus on 4 interview transcription. And then I pick one interview transcription. So, okay, when you read it, So you need to read it. The first time you read it, for example, you feel that this paragraph belong to the. You try to understand it again, and then you feel that this paragraph belong to the our quotes earlier. So you right click this, you highlight the paragraph first, and then you right click and then choose quote selection, and then you tick compatibility. So under compatibility quotes, okay, you have, and you click the compatibility quotes, you have the one that you highlighted before. Okay, this is the coming from the first interviewee transcription. Okay, and then for example, I choose Jason. Sorry. Choose Jason. So this paragraph might belong to the compatibility code again. So I right click, code selection, compatibility. Okay, again, Glenn. The software is quite heavy. It requires a lot of processing, RAM. So maybe Glenn also talk about compatibility here. Right click, code selection, compatibility. Okay, and then let's say we finish read every interview transcription, and then our coding is done. So when we click the compatibility, so it will shows you the information that you have successfully coded under the compatibility notes or under this theoretical construct. And then you read again, and then you get a sense what is the pattern appearing here, the significant point here. We'll put together all the information into one place, and then maybe you can again, if you want to remove this one, so you can just delete. Do you have delete here? No. And then let's say you have some point that you want, or your reflection, when you have some feeling about some data. Memo, you can create memo. Where can I create a memo? Okay, so new annotation, right click and then create memo. So you can just put your reflection here. For example, I feel that this point is important to understand the theory. Okay, so anything that you have the feeling, you can need to record in annotations or memo function. So you later on you will know that these points under compatibility notes, and you have some reflection on what you feel about. We have another like 20 minutes left. So I just skip these slides because I have explained this before. We try, okay, our findings. So the report, what software that I have used for my case study? So I use NVivo. During my study, my university quite pricey, so but my university already have the license for that. So NVivo, I think, is very user friendly. The wording, the menu function is easy to understand, and then you just drag and drop the file that you want to include into the folder. So under reporting, this is another challenging part of qualitative research. We need to report what you have read on earlier or what you have found in your analysis. So it involves clarifying and corroborating the disparate elements found in the data analysis into coherent whole. It's like a story a story that you want to tell, but you need to integrate the practical aspect as well as the theoretical aspect. So the elaboration on the form and significance. What are the important points that you found from the study, and is there is any association or relationship based on your must be based on your research question and theoretical framework. We also consider the possible explanation for the emerging findings. So this is the example of reporting the case study. I have taken these findings from my paper published in Student Accounting Review this year. So the case study is different. The way of reporting case study is different from phenomenology. So, but I will explain it, the phenomenology after this. But first on the case study, last time when I tried to write the case study, my supervisor told me, okay, imagine that you're writing a novel. So you need to describe the organization as a whole as well as the balance scorecard. The focus of my topic is the balance scorecard because we don't want the readers to only understand the balance scorecard, but we also want the reader to understand the organization as well. So it's like reading a story. You have the main character, but you have to know the background of the main character, for example, the family, the partners, and so on. So it's quite challenging during my time there, but alhamdulillah, I managed to finish it, my study. So storytelling style of reporting. So under case study, it's kind of like try to tell a story. And also we try to integrate the interpretation of our theoretical construct. And then, for example, okay, the decision to adopt the balance scorecard was largely driven by alpha per CO. Alpha is the name. Why I include this point? Because I want to show that later on there is one theory that explains this point. There is one theoretical construct that is theory. This story, okay, there is one behind this explanation. So this is the I have two parts of my paper. This is the findings part, and later on I have the discussion part. So under the finding, I exclude the theory components here, but only discuss the theory in the discussion section. And then interview quotations as evidence to support the interpretation. Okay, so this is my conclusion. Okay, the decision was largely driven by the first CO. This is my conclusion, what I have found from the data. And then, so we need to support the point that I have mentioned before with the interview quotation. For example, a couple of interviewees who have been in the organization since 1997 recall that since the CEO believed Alpha needed to have a reporting and controlling mechanism that were different from what have been done before. So not only one interview that I have included to support my point here, I also include another interviewee that also talk about the similar things. So we have the interpretation supported by two interviewees, as well as I have here examinations of internal management report and also a archival document. So you can see that in order for me to derive to this conclusion, I try to cross-reference the data from different interviewees and also from different type of data, including internal management report and also archival documents. So this is the one way of doing the reporting the case study research. Okay, how about the phenomenology? Phenomenology, I think, is easier because we have the codes that we have generated earlier, and then we can. This is taken from the Yi and Sharma. So these authors, they create the subtopic based on the codes. For example, the topic of the study is the positive perspective about the web blog usage, the benefits of the web blog usage. So the benefits, then the author split into 3 points, and then they try to summarize the point based on the first paragraph is the summary of the points based on the interview. So summary as a whole, and then he choose several interview quotation to support the points that he mentioned before. So it's quite easy to do the phenomenology data phenomenology reporting. Okay, and then they move to the second point. The second positive theme was the role. Okay, and then supported by another interview quotations. Okay, so important things. This is my final second last. Important things about reporting is that we need to show that the story or the report is authentic. That shows that the researchers have been in the field. For example, here, if you read this paragraph, it shows that the researchers have been in the field. For example, I purposely included archival documents collected during our field study. Okay, so the readers will believe that the researcher has been there to collect the data. And then plausibility, second criteria, is achieved and the findings and arguments make logical sense to readers through accounts of alternative explanation. This study anticipates that Alpha decision to implement the BSc will likely be its management efficient choice. So this is the theory construct. So I summarized all the findings and said that the efficient choice is present. The efficient choice theoretical construct is present in the from my data. It is evident that the first CEO played the predominant role as balance scorecard champion. So again, another theoretical construct here. So this is my interpretation and my conclusion regarding the data and against the theory. And then we also need to reflect the data with the literature. For example, here in its earlier years, Alpha experimented with the BSc using the whole system involving the whole organization. Kaplan and Norton's balance scorecard framework was adapted. So look at how I refer to the previous literature. This is the creator of the balance scorecard, and also I mentioned about how this finding also consistent with another study. So this is another aspect of my theory, and then how this aspect of my theory also consistent with my study. And finally, if there is alternative explanation, I try to include that. For example, we do not reject the possibility of persuasive rhetoric. There is another theory, but we don't consider it present in this theory. In my setting, persuasive rhetoric or rhetoric influence. So we do not reject the possibility. There is a possibility there, but in this study, what is the prominent finding is that we perceive economic benefit and their implementation. Okay, so this is the lesson learned, basically the lesson learned, even though there is a possibility of another theory, but the most prominent or the most significant point here is that the benefits of the balance scorecard that trigger the management to adopt the balance scorecard. So this is the alternative explanation that might explain the data, but in our case, in my case, this aspect is more apparent, is more significant. That's why earlier we talk about the significance or patterns and so on. Okay, maybe the information or the data regarding the persuasive rhetoric is there, but not really as important as the economic benefits of the balance scorecard. So with that, I finished my presentation today. So I hope the qualitative research is easier to pass because we don't have to show the procedures step by step or the threshold of something that we need to fulfill in order to generate the findings. So again, it's all, if I can recall the statement by Patton here. So instead, we need to do your best with your full intellectual capability. Okay. So thank you guys for listening. If you have any question, feel free to ask me. Any questions from the participants?
I have question maybe.
Yeah, Waalaikumsalam.
I have a question maybe is
yes,
not related for this. Maybe not related for this subject about novelty in the UMT.
Okay.
What definition? Condition, because in Indonesia many university about novelty.
Sorry.
Hello. Yes. I
novelty. Yes, I hear you.
To know what perception novelty because some unity is friend. Hello.
I'm sorry, Aminullah, I couldn't hear you. The connection is not clear. I couldn't hear you at all, actually. If you can type your questions in the chat box, please.
Okay. You can hear me? Can you hear me? Yes.
Okay. No, yeah, yes. Yeah. Now I can hear you.
I want to know about
okay? Can you proceed?
Novelty in UMT, because some university has a different definition about novelty for thesis. Yeah, novelty for thesis. For example, I came to UKM in Kuala Lumpur, and also my friend come from Australia and also in Indonesia has a different definition for novelty in thesis or dissertation. For example, in Jakarta, Indonesia University has definition as novelty such as new variable. This is novelty, or a new measurement. This is novelty, and also new indicator for variable is novelty. I want to know what is novelty in implementation in UTM. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you for your questions. I don't know whether I can speak on behalf of UMT, but I think in any university, we don't really specify what is the meaning of novelty. I think
Yes.
your saying is the contribution. Right, the contribution of your study. Yes, the contribution. Okay, some thesis they try to contribute in terms of they want to show the theory is there, or they want to refine the theory, or they want to refine the model, or they want to say that this certain model need more further modification and so on. So I think the safest way is when you have the proposal, you try to because it depends again to your supervisors and then the examiners. The safest way is you have to defend the proposal and also present your proposal in different places, not only in UMT but also to the conferences to get the idea, to get the validation whether you are on the safe route when you do your research or your PhD study. So that's what I'm doing during my study. I have the proposal and then I defend it in the PhD colloquium and also try to talk to several professors in different universities. Try to you can get the feedback from the expert about whether you have actually contributed
Uh,
in that area.
yes.
Okay, am
I
I
have
answering your
next
question?
question.
Actually,
Because Jakarta, now I just finished my PhD too. Hello.
how to contribute. Again, it depends on your and
Yeah, it's not clear. Okay.
yes, the connection is quite
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
I don't know whether it's your place or in my place. Okay, currently it's raining in my place, so I don't know
Okay.
whether raining contribute to the internet connection or not. Well, what? Maybe you can.
Yeah. Okay, I'll
Okay,
try.
maybe
Thank
you can
you,
type in the chat
Dr. Nur.
box. Okay, you're welcome. Okay. Is there any more question from the participant? Okay, there is one. We need the scientific material that was shown. What scientific material was shown? Can you explain more on this question? Muhammad Hassan Shakur. The PowerPoint. Okay. You want the PowerPoint slide? Okay, I will give the copy of this PowerPoint to Encik Fitri, to Mr. Fitri, and Mr. Fitri can share it with you guys after this. Okay, we have 4 minutes left. If there is no more questions, maybe you can end our discussion today. So no more question. Okay, Fitri, can we end our my presentation today?
Okay, Doctor.
Okay, thank you, Fitri, for hosting this program, and thank you guys for listening to my presentation. And again, I hope my information or my experience that I have conveyed to you is can be useful in your research and in your study. So hope to see you again in future when you can come to
Thank you very much.
UMT.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Okay,
wabarakatuh.
thank you guys. Assalamualaikum. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.